Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. Welcome back and welcome to 2024. Is it too late to say Happy New Year? I'm not sure, but it's good to be back. And the live streams will be regular from now on the Tuesday evening, 9 till 10 p.m. slot. We will have various guests as usual and regular family party representatives as well. Next week, I'll be debating with someone quite often on social media. Someone will come and argue in their case. And I really haven't got time to be engaging in keyboard debates on YouTube comments threads or whatever. So I'll sometimes say to someone, okay, thanks for sharing your view. Would you come on our live stream to come and talk about it? And normally people have got some excuse. But next week, we've got someone who said they're going to do it. So we're looking forward to that. We're going to have someone to debate with next week. Sometimes when people say they're going to come onto the live stream and debate, at the last minute, they'll drop out. But let's see. Let's see. So hopefully, all being well, we will have a sort of live action debate next week. Do say hello in the comments. I've got the comments up on screen there. There's no guest this evening. I've got lots of things to talk about, having been away for a little while. Right, one little news item. Last week, I'm sure you've all been eagerly checking your inboxes today, wondering where the Scottish Family Party fortnightly email is, newsletter email. Well, the answer is that we created it in MailChimp, sent it, but MailChimp has said no. MailChimp has said we've contravened their regulations or whatever they call them. I can't remember what it's called. Conditions of service or something, because it seems to be because of the content of our email. Now, I cannot possibly imagine what it is in the content of our email because it's fairly routine, the things we're saying. But I'm expecting this is going to be, so I've asked them what the problem is. I'm expecting MailChimp will come back and say, hate speech or who knows what, something like that, which will be total nonsense. And the solution to it, I think, is we're just going to move somewhere else in any case. I've heard of MailChimp cancelling quite a few other organizations and individuals. So it's quite likely that we're going to run into trouble with them. And we pay them, for goodness sake, for the service. So we're not going to pay them to sit in judgment on our newsletter text. So we'll probably find a new provider. So I downloaded our contact list from MailChimp today, just in case we're going to need that. But I think we will look to move. That's the solution. But let's wait and see what they say is the problem. But it is frustrating with these things because with the family party, every organization you deal with virtually, you sort of worry that there's going to be some problem somewhere along the line. And we thought MailChimp would come up one day, but that seems to have come up already. Right, we would be very delighted to see you if you came along to our meeting in Fife on Monday evening. There's details on our social media. And on Saturday, there is a big event. It's not a family party event, but I would urge you to come along to Glasgow, where the Unite for Education conference is taking place on Saturday afternoon. Now, Unite for Education is an organization that unites Christians involved in education, from home education, Christian schools, Christians in mainstream schools, so Christian independent schools, etc. It tries to bring all those people together to share their ideas and to build community and to look at things in the future as well. Who knows what might come from these links in the future? Maybe a new secondary school in Scotland. We shall see. But that's the Unite for Education conference in Glasgow, Saturday afternoon. It's just the afternoon. So do look on our social media. It would be great to see you there. I'm speaking at that event. Also, if you can make it along to Vision Church, Sunday the 4th of February, 2 p.m., an unusual time for a church service. So Sunday the 4th of February, 2 p.m., Vision Church. That's in the sort of west side of Glasgow. Again, look at our social media. It'd be great to see you there. And we're heading up to Orkney and Thurso, 15th to 17th of February. And so if you're in those areas as well, we're going to have 2 meetings on the Orkney Isles and 1 in Thurso. So if you're in those areas or anywhere near, do let us know. It would be great to see you. We went up to Stornoway beginning of last week. I had a meeting there. That was really good. And we met a few people in Inverness as well on the way past. So we're very much in action for the new year. Right. I've been very busy looking at the conversion therapy ban consultation because they've more or less published the bill. It's not actually in the form of a bill, but they've published a lot of the text that's going to go in the conversion therapy ban bill. and it's very concerning, as you can imagine. I mean, this is the consultation document. It's an enormous, great big thing. So I'm making a video analyzing it, which hopefully you'll find interesting. That's going to be about an hour and a half long, I would guess. But this is going to be a hot topic in the months to come. And if you want to get up to speed on it, then do watch that video. My overall impression of the bill that's come out, or the draft of the bill and the guidance with it, is just, it's unclear. It's really hard to know what it means. I mean, what's the classic case with a conversion therapy ban? The classic case is, person goes to, for example, a church leader and says, let's say a man said, I'm experiencing same-sex attraction. I don't want to act on those. I don't want to go down that road. Can you help me? Do you think I'm right? Should I go down that road? I don't think I should. Do you think I should? And the church leader might say, no, I don't think you should. Yes, I can help you. Let's meet up. Let's talk about it. Let's pray about it. Come and see me next week as well. And I'll really be with you as you're going through this. So would that be classed as conversion therapy? Well, reading the guidance, it's sort of not entirely clear, probably, but don't quite know. I mean, it's a really important thing in an open democratic society with the rule of law, is if you've got a law, you have to know what it means. You shouldn't have a law when you think, I don't know what I'm going to do. Am I allowed to do this? Am I not allowed to do this? I'm going to do this and afterwards find out if it was illegal or not. That's not really the way law is supposed to work. The law is supposed to say to you, make it absolutely clear so you can understand, the whole population can understand, you're allowed to do all these things. It's this particular thing that's a criminal offence. But what the Scottish government's coming up with, well, it's not clear at all what would constitute the criminal offence. And there's a million things I could talk about that, but I'll save that for the video. If you've got any questions about it, do fire them in. I mean, maybe the most shocking and ridiculous line in it is it clarifies that voluntary celibacy will not be a criminal offence. Okay, the Scottish government has produced a document in which it says that voluntary celibacy, in other words, suppression of your sexuality, as they would call it, will not be a criminal offence. I mean, what a bizarre world we live in when the government has to clarify that not having sex isn't illegal. But it's quite an interesting insight into their mindset, I would say. Right, one more thing before I get into the other subjects I want to talk about. We're at the stage where we're now interviewing people for the roles in the family party, chairman, deputy chairman roles. But this is the last possible opportunity, really, if anyone wants to come forward and be considered for those roles. I mean, you need to get in touch with us within the next, well, let's say tomorrow. Okay, you need to let us know tomorrow. But if there's anyone else who's interested, we would like to hear from you. Right, lots of things have been in the news. So, what's this? This is a strange one. Don't go to church because I'm not invited. Right, you're invited to Vision Church on the 4th of February. There we are. You'll be very welcome. Or you can come to my church anytime. Right, invitation given. Right, there's something in the news again. This story comes up from time to time in Scotland, and it reports on some sort of alleged problem, some crisis in schools. And the crisis is that boys and girls are picking the wrong subjects. Because what happens is you say to all the pupils, here are the options, choose which subjects align with your interests, with what you enjoy, what fits in with your ambitions in the future. And generally, boys and girls tend to choose different subjects. So when it comes to things like physics, I think it might have been like a highest than like 77% male. So quite a skew. With some other subjects, there'll be like drama or dance, was it? Something like 94% female. So there's quite a difference between the boys and the girls, what they choose to study at school. Right. As far as I'm concerned, what is the problem? Why is it seen as some sort of crisis that boys and girls are not statistically identical in the decisions that they take? But I heard people from Education Scotland talking about this, and it seemed like there are 6 people employed at Education Scotland to try and sort out this gender disparity, this inequality, as they call it, in terms of subject choices. Total waste of money. So what they're trying to do is to pressurize girls to do the subjects they don't really want to do, and to pressurize boys to do the subjects that they don't really want to do. What I never hear from these people, I never hear from some like, gender equality campaigner who studied English literature at university. I never hear them saying, right, we need to close this gender gap. I'm going to go off and study mechanical engineering for 3 years, and then I'll have done my part to it. You ever heard anyone say that? No. They always want someone else to be changing what they're going to study, rather than they've studied what they wanted to, but they want some other people to change what they're doing. And in further education colleges in Scotland, if there's a course that's more than, I think it's more than 3/4 male or female, they have to have a plan to solve the problem. So if your car mechanics course is like 83% male, you've got to have a plan for how you're going to sort that out. I don't know, turn some of the boys away. Or, let's say one of the other courses is the other way around. Then that course, again, they need to be turning the girls away. And you've got to get some of the boys who want to be car mechanics. You've got to get them to do the beauty course or something. I don't know. It was completely crazy, an absolute waste of money. And hopefully it's going to dawn. There's two problems with this. One is it's counterproductive. The other is we can't afford it anymore. I mean, playtime is over, as I say from time to time. But in the Scottish government, they don't seem to have caught on to that at all. Right, an interesting question from Andrew. Why are you so obsessed with other people's sexuality and genitalia? What are they like posters on my wall or something? I'm not sure where that's come from. It sounds quite scandalous, being obsessed with other people's genitalia. So if you want to give the evidence for that, I would be fascinated to hear that. Right, Gareth. Conversion therapy guidance is inviting outsiders to your school to question children's current identity considered conversion therapy. I would try to disrupt their current identity. The guidance is the law, we're talking about law here, with associated guidance. So the law, they're saying, is intended to not cover like health professionals, so-called in this field, who are going to take children and mutilate them in the name of changing gender. So that is explicitly not covered in the conversion therapy ban. But what is covered, is quite interesting, is it talks about if you try to suppress someone's developing sexuality or developing gender identity, then that can be classed as conversion therapy. So if you've got someone who's starting to think they might be transgender, then if you try to sort of suppress that or to say you don't think that's a good idea at that early stage, then that will be classed as conversion therapy, which I think is quite extreme. Right, now this is an interesting one. The drug sold by the First Minister's brother-in-law, white. Okay, right, get the joke. Following Humza Yousaf's white speech that he gave in the Parliament. Anna Sauer, of course, gave a virtually identical speech in the same debate. So that's very important to remember when thinking about the Labour Party as well. And just while we're at it, what did the Conservatives have to say in that debate? Well, they just went with the flow as well. I mean, all the people who spoke in it were heading in the same direction, and no one challenged what Humza Yousaf said or Anna Sauer. So Humza Yousaf's family, there is an interesting topic, isn't it? So just a quick update on that. So last week it was announced that a gangland attack was made on Humza Yousaf's cousin, and he lost his finger apparently. So a pretty violent and unpleasant attack. And the story is that this was mistaken identity. Actually, he was nothing to do with the gangs. They just got the wrong person. But then we've also had the story that Humza Yousaf's wife's brother was arrested on a drug offense. He was then released on bail, I assume, I'm not sure. And virtually as soon as he was released, he was at the scene of a violent incident where someone was thrown out of a window, which one would assume would be something to do with the same sort of gang drug sort of business, what one would guess. So, I mean, there's some shady goings on around the First Minister and his wife's families. Now, do those things reflect badly on them? Not necessarily. They certainly don't reflect well on them, but it would be unfair to assume that they knew about them or endorse them. And maybe, particularly, the brother-in-law, maybe he's been seen as a problem. People have been very concerned about him, very disapproving of what he's been doing. So you can't really blame people for that. On the other hand, if they were aware and hadn't reported it to the police at an earlier stage, or Humza Yousaf was the Justice Secretary, for example, so there might be questions to ask there. So in a sense, maybe Humza Yousaf and his wife deserve our sympathy on these issues, but it's possible that things might come out that indicate that maybe they don't deserve our sympathy in some particular aspects of it. But it's a very interesting story developing, and we'll have to watch where it goes. Right, what's this? Andrea back again. You get so little. Actually read that out. Read what? And a minute later. What? I don't know. Anyway, the tourist levy passed through the Parliament. Right, I think it's a bad idea. If you tax something, you suppress it. They're talking about the conversion therapy ban, suppressing things. If you tax something, you suppress it. So it will damage the tourist industry. And what it will tend to do is skew the tourist industry towards what the government wants to spend its money on. Because what they're saying is that they will take the tourist levy and, to some degree in any case, spend it on events. Now, what sort of events will the Scottish government put on? Right, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Whereas if you leave the money in people's pockets, they'll come to Scotland and spend it on what they want to do. Right, who's better at... Now, imagine you're on holiday in Scotland. Who's better at knowing what you want your money spending on, you or the government? Well, obviously you. So the fear with that, first of all, just the fact of the tax will suppress tourism, but then also the way it's spent will be less efficient in meeting the needs of actual tourists. So I think that is a bad move, but just typical of the Scottish Parliament. I mean, there's that as well. Then there's the short-term regulation that's going to make holiday accommodation more expensive. So, yeah, there's going to be trouble ahead in that department. Right, another area of interest I've talked about before on the live stream, but I thought a bit more about it today. You're probably aware of the issue of excess deaths, that far more people are dying across the UK than would normally be expected, considering the age profile of the population. So after a pandemic, when maybe more sort of elderly, frail people might have come to the end of their lives, you might even expect the death rates to be a bit lower after them, but they've actually been higher, and it's a bit of a mystery. Now, some people are extremely interested in this and are really sort of jumped at it thinking, right, this is our evidence that the vaccines are very dangerous. Now, my opinion on that is, I just don't know. I don't know what's causing these excess deaths. It could be some side effect of coronavirus. It could be something to do with the vaccines. It could be to do with the lockdowns and effects on people's diagnoses. It could be something completely different. But it's happening in countries across the world, and it needs to be investigated properly. But the impression being given is that the government's reluctant to do it. So I heard Andrew Bridgen, again, talking about this in the Parliament, and I think he's got some very good points to make. I think he's way over the top in some of the things he says as well. They're really, a bit hysterical. But he's got some good points to make and some very valid questions. And what I want to hear is someone from the government come out and counter him. Say, right, these are your points. This is our answer. Or to the extent that they can, if they have to conclude saying, basically we don't know, okay, fine, come out and say you don't know and explain what investigations are underway. But the thing I'm finding frustrating is I can't find anyone putting the other side of the story, which is just bizarre. I think maybe quite a few of the people in the medical profession and within the government, they're thinking, they're not going to lower themselves by bothering to interact with Andrew Bridgen and his sort of anti-vax views. Well, I think that's a mistake. They should come out and discuss this openly. Now, my thought all along on vaccines is, even if it turns out that there are some quite negative side effects of them, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the wrong decision to introduce them. Now, that might seem like a really strange thing to say. Similarly, if they hadn't been introduced and did turn out to be safe, then it doesn't necessarily mean that that was the wrong decision to not introduce them. Right, let me try and explain that a little bit more. I mean, let's say you're heading towards a blind bend in your car in Scotland, and you say, right, I'm going to go around this blind bend at 50 miles an hour, driving on the left. And someone else says, no, I think you should go around this blind bend, driving on the right. Now, I would say, right, driving on the right, that's not a good idea because you're likely to meet oncoming traffic. I'm going to go around on the left. So let's say I drive around on the left and I meet someone driving on the wrong side of the road and there's a big accident. Now, after them, if someone said, you see, you should have taken my advice, you made a mistake there, driving on the left, would you say, yeah, they're right, you should have taken their advice, you should have, you should have driven on the right, like I said? Well, no, because you make decisions based on the probabilities. So sometimes you might make what's the most sensible decision, but it turns out that it goes wrong. Sometimes you might make a decision that really the evidence was against it. It wasn't a wise decision, but by luck, it turns out right. So I'd say that attitude to vaccines, that even if there are serious problems associated with them, doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad decision. But we just need to know. We just need to know the truth. So yeah, I find it increasingly frustrating. You can't find any serious debate on the issue. But the statistics floating around saying more people have died in the last excess deaths in last year or last couple of years, than civilians in Britain were dying in World War II, or in the whole of World War II. I mean, it's quite shocking statistics. So we will await developments in that area. Gareth, all right, okay, yep, that's what we're talking about. The consultation is indeed open for the conversion therapy ban. I mean, shall I bother responding to the consultation? Sometimes it's just a good intellectual exercise to go through it and structure my thinking on each of the points. So it's quite a useful thing to do. In terms of sending it to the government, what does that achieve? Well, really nothing, I don't think. I mean, the prize with the consultation is being invited to the committee in the Parliament. Now, that would be great, wouldn't it? If I could get in that committee room on camera, and I wouldn't be outrageous. It wouldn't do anything, like impolite or dramatic, but it would just be a fantastic opportunity to put forward points in a powerful way. But what's the chance of that happening? What's the chance of that committee making the colossal blunder of inviting me along to speak in one of their committee meetings? It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So probably for me, filling in the thing is not a good idea. Right, what else has been going on? Voter fraud. Well, that's maybe a bit of a dramatic headline, but there's an issue with vote security in Scotland that I raised a little while ago. You might remember it. It was about the SNP in Falkirk, and what they were doing was they would knock on people's doors and say, who are you going to vote for? They'd have a little form, who are you intending to vote for? And they'd make a note of who the person was planning to vote for. Then they'd say, would you like to apply for a postal vote? And the person would say, yes or no. And then they'd say, look, we've got a postal vote application form here. Do you want to fill it in? Fill it in and give it to us, and we'll send it to the Electoral Commission or to the council, wherever it has to go. And so the person will fill it in, they get it. So the Falkirk SNP branch would have a pile of forms, and from each person, they'd have one form saying who they're going to vote for, and they'd also have their postal vote application form. Now, if you're an SNP activist, you've got a form here. This person says they're going to vote Lib Dem, and you've got their postal vote application form. What do you do with that postal vote application form? Do you send it to the council, or does that one go astray? And you've also got another person, they say they're going to vote SNP, and you've got their postal vote application form. What do you do with that? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? You make sure that one gets to the council. So I think that whole system is wide open to electoral fraud, even if it doesn't happen. Just the suspicion of it. The SNP in Falkirk should realise that really you cannot do that. It looks really dodgy, doesn't it? I don't know how many other areas in Scotland this happens. It probably happens in lots of other areas as well. So the Electoral Commission was updating their guidance in this area, and they invited people to comment. So I sent them my video about what was happening in Falkirk, just summarised it, and they emailed back and said, right, okay, they understood what I'd said, they got the point, and they've published their new guidance, and it's still allowed. You're still allowed to do what the SNP do, which I think is just bizarre. It's bizarre that that's allowed. Now, it's sort of understandable that the Electoral Commission hadn't thought about that. Therefore, they hadn't got a rule that it was banned. But now they have thought about it. They understand it completely. and they've decided that it's absolutely fine, which I think is very concerning. Now, I don't know what scale that happens in Scotland. It wouldn't be a huge issue, but I think it's significant enough to undermine confidence in the elections to a small degree, and a small degree is much too much. So, Electoral Commission, I think you have messed up on that one. Right, talking about elections, we've seen the news today that people are going to be allowed to vote in the general election, even if they've been abroad, lived abroad for over 15 years. So a regulation's been changed. So let's say you've decided that you don't want to live in Scotland anymore. You want to go and live in the United States of America, and you've lived there for, say, 30 years. You've got no intention of ever coming back to live in Scotland. Should you be able to have a vote on what happens in the country where you and I live? I think absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, they may still be a citizen, so if they choose to come back to live here, then great, you can have a vote again. But someone who's got no direct interest in the nation still having a vote, I think is just completely wrong. It also says about children, whereby you have a child who was born in let's say they were born in Scotland, but they basically never lived here. So they moved away when they were, say, 3 years old. They've been brought up in another country. They've got no intention to ever live here. And then, I mean, that's what happens. They're given a vote in Britain or in Scotland for the rest of their lives. I mean, in which constituency, for a start? You know, the one where they lived for a couple of years. I mean, it seems completely ridiculous. I mean, why are they doing it? This is the sort of thing often that tends to come from, you know, human rights, from the United Nations or the European Court of Justice or something, where they'll say, you know, you're infringing people's rights if you don't let them vote in the election, if they're a citizen. But it just seems bizarre that decision has been made. So it seems like you're allowed to vote virtually if you're here on holiday, and you're allowed to vote if you've moved to another country and you've lived there for decades. I just think it's not right. It's not right, and that needs to be challenged. Right, how are we doing? Interesting one. Orcadian nationalist. Well, Orcadian. Oh, you're right. Hope to see you next month. They do this. Don't even put the minor parties on the ballot for military personnel. Surely, right. I'd be very interested to see further information about that, because that would be truly shocking if that was the case. Okay. Did you see the advice from the NHS today? I don't know if any of you saw that on social media. I don't know if it was on the mainstream media. They've been advising people to walk like a penguin when it's snowy and icy, in order to not fall over and injure themselves. So, yeah. What do you think about that? Is that the NHS's job to give people advice on how to walk in the winter? I mean, initially I thought that sort of looks a bit ridiculous, trying to do that. On the other hand, if there is some good advice that will help people not to fall over and have accidents, maybe that's worth giving. I don't know. What do you think? That's an interesting one. Now, I've got some advice in this area as well, because apparently, you've probably done it yourself. A lot of people stub their toes walking around rooms in the dark, and apparently it's quite easy to break a toe. You don't realize you've done it. So I've got a solution to stubbing your toe when you're walking around a room that's pitch black. Are you ready for this? This is going to be a life-changing tip for you. This is the ultimate life hack. If you're walking around a room in the pitch dark, walk backwards. Okay, because you can't see in any case, so it makes no difference that you're facing the wrong way. Then if you walk into anything, you hit it with your heel, and it doesn't hurt remotely at all. So I think if the NHS is going to promote penguin walking in Scotland, then I think they could promote that in their official advice as well, I would suggest. Save the NHS from hospitals. That's what I thought. Ultimately, you know, if it is actually good advice, but on the other hand, I can see that point as well. I mean, if someone's saying to me, you know, walk like this on the ice, I do feel that a little bit. I feel, you know, I'm grown up, just leave me to it. Remember, was it during the pandemic when the government would just had advertising everywhere? I had an advert on social media saying, go for a walk. Oh, really? I did not appreciate that. Did not appreciate it. It is. Thank you. Right, someone who appreciates my advice there. Walking around backwards in the dark from now on. Yeah, I mean that would save the NHS. It could save them billions in a reduction in the number of broken toes they have to deal with. Notice what I said there. It could save them billions. Yeah, no evidence for that at all, but that's what the parties tend to do. It could save them up to 3 billion if they cut down the number of broken toes they were dealing with. Well, the next election is going to be, well, there's council elections coming up all the time. There's one in Stirling area next week, I think. There's one coming up in Jedburgh. So we're looking to get a candidate there. So there's council by-elections coming up left, right, and centre all the time. But the main election we're looking at is the Westminster election, which we're expecting to be in November. We haven't launched another appeal for candidates for that. We've trained one batch, but we're going to try and bring together another batch of candidates for that before too long. So if that's something you're interested in, watch this space. And that's quite an experience being a candidate in an election. The number of candidates we'll probably have at least 12, but maybe 20. I wouldn't be surprised if we even had 30. So we've just started planning for a party election broadcast, things like that. So getting candidates trained. So we're gearing up for that to be ready for it when it comes, because elections are the time when people are most interested in politics. And when people are most interested in politics, they're more likely, when they decide who to vote for, they're more likely to look into, right, who's this Scottish Family Party bunch? Let's have a look at them. And that's when people find out about us, and that's really important. Right, who's standing in the Western Isles? We don't have a candidate at the moment, but we will hope to have one by the time of the election. So we're really encouraging people there to come forward to be the candidate. It would be great to have a candidate there. Right, what else has been going on? Right, we've been having a spot of paganism in the Scottish Parliament this week. You might have seen they had a pagan delivering the time for reflection today, who talked about the different types of paganism, including witchcraft. And the content of what she said, it was pretty bland and innocuous. Brotherhood of man, diversity is our strength. Let's all live in peace together type stuff. It probably would have gone down pretty well in the Scottish Parliament. But also the Scottish minister put out a message wishing Scottish pagans a sort of happy winter solstice. I don't know if happy is the right word, whatever you want for your winter solstice greeting before Christmas as well. And there's a little overlap between the SNP and the pagan movement in Scotland, like the Beltane Fire Festival, which is sort of mass public funded indecency with lots of things burning around as well, people with not enough clothes on. So that's, say, taxpayer funded pagan event as well. So there is this overlap with the SNP and the Scottish pagan movement. And I think that overlap's becoming more apparent within the Parliament for sure. So that's an interesting development, and we will see how that goes. I think with religions like paganism, I listened to a little bit of what the lady was saying today. I'll probably make a video about it. But she was talking about that to be a pagan, you don't really need to believe anything, but they believe in these really important values, which obviously comes out back to the question, well, where do these values come from? And there didn't seem to be an answer to that, but that will be very interesting to see that developing. So keep your eye open for a video about paganism's debut in the Scottish Parliament. Right, what else has there been going on? I was going to say a little bit about cars, interlinked cars. Now, I don't know if you've heard much about this. It's been in the news a little bit recently. But as you can imagine, as technology advances, the IT interconnectedness of cars is increasing and increasing. So some cars, for example, the manufacturer tracks how you drive it. Wherever you are in the world, you drive the thing around, and the manufacturer gets information about how you're driving the car, and they also get information about what goes wrong with it. So they're trying to work out, what makes the suspension break on this type of car. Is it people who accelerate too fast? Do they go over bumps too fast? Or whatever. So that sort of information from newer cars from some manufacturers, that's already happening. Your car is in touch with it. But if you think about your phone, the mobile phone provider knows where your phone is all the time. Now, we're heading towards the point where your car manufacturer will know where your car is. And also, it will be very easy. Once we start getting towards driverless cars, the cars will start linking up with each other in a sort of electronic interconnectedness type of way. So if they've got driverless cars going along the motorway, say, then you won't have the cars driving independently. They're formed together to make a train where the car at the front does the driving, and the other ones are linked up to it, and they just brake and accelerate in unison with the one at the front. And if you're not connected with that, well, you sort of won't be fitting in with that. And insurance companies as well, you might be aware that young people now, to reduce their insurance, you can get a black box to put in your car. And what the black box does is it basically analyzes your driving, checks how fast you're going in different speed limits, how fast you go around corners, etc., etc. So the black box is to monitor your driving in order to give a cheaper insurance cost. Now, if that's there for young people, how longer will it be before insurance companies start saying, well, they want that for everyone, or anyone can have one of those, it will reduce your insurance? How long before a government says, well, everyone's got to have one of those, we're going to make sure you're following the law, we're going to make sure you are a safe driver? Now, there are also devices as well, where if people have been convicted of drunk driving, then they have something fitted to their car, and they have to do a breathalyzer test before they can start the car. Now, again, that sounds like maybe a good idea for someone who's been convicted of drunk driving 3 times. But on the other hand, you can imagine a government like the Scottish government thinking, oh, this sounds a great idea. Why don't we have one in every car? Why don't we monitor everyone all the time? So you can see where this is heading, isn't it? A huge amount of data. At the moment, getting into your car and driving somewhere, it's quite an experience of freedom, isn't it? You go where you want to, you drive how you like. Okay, there's the regulations, but it's basically up to you. But we could be heading to a stage where your every turn of the steering wheel, press on a pedal in the car is monitored, recorded, and that information is used for the purpose of insurance or law enforcement, or just knowing where people are, analyzing traffic flows or whatever. It's important information for the government. Right, how does that make you feel? Well, personally, I'm not too happy about that. That doesn't sound too good. On the other hand, think about spending money. It used to be you'd spend cash and there wouldn't be any really record of where you'd spent that or where. Whereas now, I mean, there's a huge record. Virtually whenever people buy things now, there's a record of it. Even if you use cash, it's quite likely you're being caught on some sort of CCTV camera as well in a lot of shops. But those developments with cars have caused some consternation among certain people. And I think going forward, this is an issue we need to keep an eye on, because you've just got to imagine the Scottish government getting to grips with that. What do they value more? Your sense of freedom and anonymity, or the fact that they can make roads a little bit safer, even though they suck every last ounce of enjoyment out of driving your car around the country? So a one to watch, but a concern, I would suggest. Yes, yeah, effectively, yeah, going around in a train. Now, driverless cars, I quite like the idea. If you're going on a long journey on the motorway, if I can sit and read my book instead of driving on the motorway, then fantastic. I mean, I can't wait to get that. But I certainly don't want that all the time as well. So, interesting times and one to watch. Now, there's a great story on the BBC today, which I thought was absolutely classic BBC. I could hardly believe it when I read it. The BBC are always talking about other people being conspiracy theories and fake news and this sort of thing. But they were talking about the Hamas attack into Israel. And they were saying some of the guards, the soldiers on the border, whose job it was to be observing what was going on in Gaza and warning of attacks, a group of those soldiers were female. And the story was that these females had been reporting suspicious activity, they'd been raising concerns, and they'd been ignored. Right, why do you think that was? Why were they ignored? Well, this is the BBC, remember. The story, of course, they were ignored because of sexism. So the reason this happened was sexism. If the Israeli Defense Force had just been a bit more feminist, then it probably would never have happened. And for the BBC, that passes as a news story. I mean, they can't help it. They virtually all think the same. They prick every story, every issue through the same lens, and so this is the sort of thing that we get. And I thought it was pretty ridiculous. Just as a side issue on that, it's quite common to hear things about, something goes wrong, and then it'll turn out that someone or other had warned about it. I mean, one of the classic examples is if some terrible child abuse took place, and a social worker had raised a concern at an earlier stage, and the implication is always, oh, well, the social work department must have been completely useless because a concern was raised and they just didn't bother to follow it up. How irresponsible is that? So they're the ones really to blame. But that can be very, very unfair, can't you? So if someone says a concern was raised, I always want to know how often a concern is raised, how regular are concerns. Maybe everyone who's on that guard post, at the border of Gaza, maybe concerns are raised weekly, every week of the year, and they have been for years. There'll be something that's seen that's a bit suspicious. I mean, similarly with the social work department, how many reports of the sort of low-level concerns are there? Maybe massive, massive numbers, but that's so a bit more information is needed beyond the fact that some warnings were given. All right, we've got an interesting one here. The Israeli thing did not happen. Which Israeli thing? I'd be interested to know. I'm not quite sure which thing you are referring to. Right, John, you only need to do a phone search for a product. A few seconds later, you're bombarded with adverts for the same product. Big Brother is watching. I mean, that's true. You don't even need to search for it, do you? You just need to talk about it. I've had that happen lots of times. You just talk about something, and then something comes up on your phone related to it, which does feel pretty strange to me. But that's where we are. Do I mind that it's listening into my conversations? I would say I do, even if it's being used for perfectly innocent reasons, like someone trying to sell you something. I still don't like the idea that is taking place. If anyone knows more about that, I'd be interested to know. Are mobile phones allowed to listen into your conversations? It's obvious that they do. Is that actually allowed? This is BBC having to apologize for misreporting a news story in Gaza. Take everything from the BBC with a pinch of salt. Indeed. I mean, this story they've got about these female soldiers, they weren't really claiming to have any evidence for it. They just got the story of some soldiers that said they'd seen some suspicious activity, and then they would jump into the conclusion, because the soldiers were female, the fact that it was ignored must have been because of sexism. And then there's a story that fits their narrative. Classic BBC. So how about what's going on in America? I've been following that particularly. I haven't been following it assiduously, but I've got a rough idea what's going on there in the Republican elections to decide their candidates to be president. I mean, it's looking like it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to be Donald Trump. It's a fascinating situation there. Vivek Ramaswamy has dropped out. I don't know if you saw that candidate. I'm quite relieved that he dropped out. I found him quite a strange character. I read a book by him about a year ago, I think. It was really good. He was very responsible and restrained, trying to present himself as being very moderate in this book. But the person who's been competing to be the Republican presidential candidate, it seemed like a completely different person. He said some pretty off-the-wall things. He said he wanted Hamas. He said he wanted their heads on spikes in Gaza. I mean, a really bizarre, unsavory thing to say for a presidential candidate. The other thing he was saying is it's a big conspiracy, by the deep state or whatever, to stop Donald Trump from being the candidate. What they want, what the people in control want, they want Nikki Haley to win. So if you vote for me, and if I beat Nikki Haley, and then when they stop Trump, they'll get me instead, then we'll have defeated the big state. It's like his whole pitch is based on this sort of conspiracy theory thinking. Really, really bizarre. So I'm quite glad that he's dropped out, at least. I've quite liked what I've heard of Ron DeSantis. I think he's genuinely pro-life. He's a real social conservative. Nikki Haley, I don't know much about her. I mean, Donald Trump was quite vocally pro-life not too long ago, but now that's gone. I always wondered at the time, is Donald Trump really pro-life? Is that really one of his core commitments? Looking at his wider philosophy, I was never convinced it was actually a genuine, heartfelt view of his. But as far as I'm concerned, if someone's saying that's their policy and that's what they're doing, then that goes a long way. But now Donald Trump has changed quite dramatically on that issue, and is now taking a much more sort of middle of the road issue. We'll try and find a compromise, which is very disappointing. But still, I mean, still compared to the Democrats, it's night and day. Right, what else has been? Yes, that's Donald. I think there's some with Donald Trump. News reports are saying that a lot of Christians, the sort of evangelical Christian vote, has maybe been a bit wary of Donald Trump in the past, is getting behind him more now. I find that quite interesting. I'm not quite sure why that is. If it was an election between Trump and Biden, then I could understand it more there, that there might be some logic to it. But at this stage, I do find it quite confusing. Okay, what have we got here? John, movie in the cinemas, One Life is brilliant. Real pro-life story. Was a tearjerker. Right, I hadn't heard of that. Is that in mainstream cinemas? Is that a... Yep, I will keep an eye open for that. Donald Trump's wife's a Christian as well. His mother-in-law was. Now, when I was in... yeah, thank you. When I was in Stornoway, well, on the Isle of Lewis last week, we were driving along and someone pointed out the house of Donald Trump's mother. I think it was just outside Stornoway. So that was quite an interesting thing to see. I think he went back there a while ago, didn't he? And there was some controversy, as you would expect, inevitably there. So, okay. What shall we go back to? Let's look through my... it's quite a small issue, but it's something I noticed. There was a story a while ago about Ruth Davidson, former leader of the Scottish Conservatives. She now spends her time, I think, she does some work with Times Radio and various other media operations, and she's in the House of Lords, of course, as well. Now, Ruth Davidson is lesbian, of course. She's married to a woman, needless to say. But a little while ago on Twitter, she put a picture of Gillian Anderson. I don't know who she is. I don't know if she's a film star or what. I have no idea. So dressed in basically lingerie. And she put this picture on social media, basically saying like, whoa, look at her type thing. I think people thought this was, sort of a bit distasteful from a married woman. They weren't sure what was going on there. And she got a bit of flack for it, I think. But now she's done it again. She was talking about, things she'd wish for, in a perfect world. And she was effectively saying, if her wishes came true, she'd be married to this Gillian Anderson, whoever she is. I just think, Ruth Davidson, have you got no clue? Have you got no clue about your marriage relationship that you're in? I mean, if you're married, it's pretty basic, isn't it? You don't go saying, oh, I wish I was married to someone else. Even if it is just, a film star or whatever, you just don't do that. How does that make the other person feel? I mean, I just find it quite bizarre that Ruth Davidson, who seems quite, intelligent in lots of ways, that she can't see that she's doing something wrong. But anyway, that's that, right? So, I've got to get some education here. Gillian Anderson was an actress in the X-Files, right? Thank you very much. So she was an actress indeed. Yeah, another one as well. Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting, there isn't that? To for someone in that position who talks about lots of different issues quite sensitively in many cases, is unable to see that. And that's quite that's quite interesting to know. Right, I'll just mention very quickly some of the other things as well. If you are interested in applying for our chairman and deputy chairman jobs, I mean, tomorrow really is the last day to send something in to register with those. Other things coming up. Meeting in Fife on Monday night, Saturday afternoon. Unite for Education conference, which is about basically Christian education, Christian influence in education in Scotland, in all forms, home education to state schools. That's in Glasgow on Saturday afternoon. See our social media. I'm speaking at that. 4th of February, that's a Sunday, 2 p.m. I will be speaking with some other people in the family party at Vision Church in the west of Glasgow. And then 15th to 17th, Orkney and Thursday. If you're in those areas, get in touch. It would be great to see you. Right, we've got a few minutes left. I'll go back to the conversion therapy ban consultation to have a look at the thing. So I'm making this video. I've started the video off with a couple of clips of Kate Forbes in the leadership campaign, SNP leadership campaign. And she's asked questions about the conversion therapy ban. And these clips, she says that conversion therapy is abhorrent, no place in modern Scotland, and she fully supports a conversion therapy ban. So that's what she was saying, which is quite interesting, because I don't think she really thinks that. I don't think Kate Forbes really thinks that it's abhorrent for, say, a free church minister to counsel someone who's experiencing gender identity confusion and to help them to come to terms and accept their actual sex or bring their gender identity in line with their sex, for example. I don't believe that Kate Forbes actually thinks that that minister is doing something abhorrent. So why she said that during the election campaign is an interesting question, isn't it? Now, before we got to this consultation, there were various committees in the Parliament. And you might remember one of the committees that had a lady came in and she said that she thought prayer could be just as harmful as electric shock therapy, which was just a bizarre thing to say. That's the sort of thing that deserves laughing at as much as arguing with. But in the Scottish Parliament committee, it just got, nods. Okay, thank you for sharing your view. And the only other thing they were saying that the conversion therapy is like having a conversation to try and help someone move away from a certain sexual orientation or not act on it. Then they're saying that's amounts to be a form of torture, which again is so ridiculous and he's laughing at. But in the Scottish Parliament, you see the MSPs going, "Oh yeah, thanks for explaining that to me. Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't realized that before. Now I know that. I understand the issue much better." And then they say if it's a form of torture, then people can't consent to it because you're not allowed to consent to torture. I mean, it's just the standard of debate is so pitiful, and it needs someone there just to burst the bubble and just point out how utterly ridiculous that is. But when the Scottish Family Party is represented in the Parliament, that will happen for sure. The language in their document they produced is fascinating as well. It talks about like prayer, for example, being used against someone. So someone might pray with someone, but the way the Scottish government sees it is prayer is being used against them. It talks about weaponizing people's religious beliefs against them, by which they mean saying to someone, as a Christian, I don't believe this is something that you ought to do. Okay, I would see that as sharing Christian teaching. The Scottish government would see that as exploiting someone's religious beliefs in that way. It was quite bizarre language. I mean, the guidance is so confused at some point. It says, for example, any advice given must be non-directive. Parental guidance, parental direction is okay as long as it's non-directive. I mean, what's non-directive direction? I mean, it really does get pretty muddly. Right, Mary. Don't want help, don't ask for it. Should be free to ask anyone you want to help. I mean, absolutely. Because the law they're proposing is absolutely clear that consent will be no defense. So if you say, this person came to me and asked if I could talk to them and support them and possibly pray with them, whatever, to help them through this issue, then the fact that the person asked for it is no defense, because they believe LGBTQI plus people, it's as though it's like they treat them as children, almost. They don't really have their own will. They're influenced and swayed by the people around them, which I think is almost a dehumanizing view to take, to treat someone's decisions as not really their own. I mean, our placard on this issue says, let LGBT people choose, don't ban conversion therapy. But the Scottish government's point is, do not let them choose, because they're not capable of choosing. They think they are. Some of them think they're capable of choosing, but they're not really. We know best for them. So when they say they've chosen, they haven't really, because we know what they really should have chosen. So yeah, it's not good. I've tried to actually see progressive is creating more confusion, banning any means of coming back. Yeah, absolutely. One interesting thing in this law and the guidance alongside it is sometimes it gets pretty close to saying, like a church leader, for example, or an imam or whoever, can say to someone, like, let's say we've got an imam, so they could say to someone, the teaching of Islam is that homosexual relationships are immoral. So that's something that Muslims shouldn't do. You're allowed to say that to someone, but you're not allowed to then say, right, so how can I help you? How can I support you with this issue? Because that would be illegal. So in terms of people's well-being and mental health, how's that going to play out for people in this sort of context where someone's telling them that the teaching of what they think, this is something you shouldn't do, but then to actually try and support someone and help them not to do it is illegal. That's not the formula for good pastoral care within certain communities, I would say. Let's put it that way. It's getting to the point, just like insurance companies, they're changing the meanings of words. Yes, yeah, that's very true. There is inflation in terms of language. I mean, violence is the classic example, isn't it? I mean, I was absolutely shocked a couple of years ago to look up violence in a dictionary, and I think it was the Cambridge English Dictionary, and the definition was actions or words intended to hurt someone. So the dictionary definition of violence now includes words. And so if you say something to someone they don't like, they could say that was a violent attack. They could phone up with the police to say, I've been violently attacked. The newspaper headline could be, that you violently attacked someone in the street. And the vast majority of people assume that the word means what it actually does mean, and get completely the wrong end of the stick. So the changing of meaning of words, I think, is a very serious problem, and it is rampant in this document. Absolutely rampant. Okay, let's see what they're also saying that conversion therapy would be an aggravation. So you committed another crime and the intention to change someone's sexuality or gender identity was part of your motivation for committing that crime. That would make it more serious. I mean, I can't quite imagine what that crime would be or what someone would do, but anyway, that's what they're saying. There's also a section where you could get some sort of court order to prevent people engaging in so-called conversion therapy. And that's quite concerning, because I would imagine the way that might get applied is they might say, right, Reverend so-and-so at such and such a church, we're worried that you're going to be involved in conversion therapy. You haven't been charged with it at any time, but some people have reported concerns, and so we're going to place some restrictions on you. And in a sense, it doesn't matter what those restrictions are. Just the fact that the government has given out a court order to restrict your behavior on this grounds is pretty sinister in my view. And reading it, as with so much, it's not quite clear how it's going to play out, but that's what will happen. The councils can instigate it. So you'll get councils finding out about what they think is the most outspoken church in their area. I don't think they'll go after mosques. They're the most outspoken church in their area. And I can imagine the activists will try and whip up a campaign against it to get some sort of court order to restrict the activities of that church. One of the things it says can be done in these court orders is it prevents a person traveling to a certain place where it's feared, they might engage in conversion therapy. So which place might the reverend be restricted from going to? Probably his church building. So it's interesting how that's going to work out there. Something else that's interesting that's not in the document. How's it going to work if someone's in Scotland, but they have a Zoom meeting with some sort of counsellor or supporter or whatever, who's, for example, in England. I don't think they can cover that in the bill. So I wonder if that might become a little bit of a trend, that where people are seeking this sort of support, that they will get the hang of it and realize that what you need to do is go on the internet, have a search around, find an organization in England that will be able to help you, do it online, and then I think you will be fine. Maybe the Scottish government will try to tighten that up in the future. But we shall see. So look out for the big video about that topic, and it will tell you all about it. Right, our time is more or less up. Thank you very much for your comments. I've been following those. Quite a few people watching tonight as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks to those of you who are watching later as well. And do tune in next week, because we have, I think his name might be Doug, a gentleman is coming on to debate. That is always interesting, isn't it? You never know what's going to happen when someone comes on to debate live. So we'll look forward to that. And I will see you next week. Right, good night.